Hi, my name is Johanna Schouten. I'm a perinatal mental health coach, and today I wanted to talk to you about a child's motor skills. Maybe your child is struggling with their development. Maybe you're finding it really hard to sort of put your finger on what's going on, but maybe intuitively you feel that something is off. And maybe you have, together with your health practitioner, come to some sort of conclusion that you may need to step in sort of a journey where your child's unique abilities and their motor skills have to take center stage. Being a parent is this incredible adventure, and it's sometimes hitting bumpy roads that are challenging to understand for both you and your child. Sometimes those bumpy roads are related to things like motor skills, neurological motor skills. And as I have experience under my belt in the journey of figuring this out together with my children, yes, all three of my beautiful kids unfortunately struggled with this to some extent. And it's really inspired me to seek as much information, try out lots of different therapies with them. And the results have been mixed. Some have been good. In the end, we really found a great therapy, which I would love to share with you today. But as I said, mixed results. So as I said, I really wanted to share this with you, as I'm hoping that you will find clues here to understand what's going on with your child, or maybe even find a solution for them. So all three of our children were slightly impatient. They were born prematurely, all of them. The twins were born at 32 weeks and our oldest was born at 36 weeks. And that could have been a first clue on our journey to figuring out why they were having difficulties developing their motor skills, all to a different extent. All three of them were different, but well, I can tell you it was a journey. Having said that, not all children born prematurely per se suffer from difficulties in development of their neurological motor skills, and children born on time, or even children born later than 40 weeks, can also have the same fate. So anyway, looking back at the way my children developed, especially my oldest, in hindsight, there were many clues. But because I was a first-time mum, I had no idea to look out for these things. And when our twins came along, I received a lot more guidance because they were born even, at 32 weeks and lots of medical issues. So I received a lot of help from lots of different professionals, and I was able to get the right help quicker for them than with my oldest. So unfortunately for my oldest, he's a bit of an introvert, and he really suffered. He really suffered from insecurities, and he wasn't doing very well in school at one point, which made things, security-wise, confidence-wise, it made it a lot worse for him. And during the pandemic, we were homeschooling, and we discovered that he was ambidextrous. I had no idea what this meant at the time. So for anyone listening or reading this, this is what my friend Google tells us about the word ambidextrous. It's derived from Latin. It has Latin roots. And ambi means both, and dexter means right or favorable. So ambidextrous is literally both. So when it came down to my boy's writing skills, he was really struggling immensely because his muscles hadn't developed enough to be able to hold the pen for long and to hold the pen in the right position to write letters properly. So both left and right hand were more or less equally developed. The muscles were sort of equally developed. So he was never into writing, for example, but when we discovered that he didn't have one dominant hand, either left or right, and most people are either one of these, and we discovered that his muscles were underdeveloped compared to other kids who had mastered those writing skills a lot easier. So A physical fit therapist tried to give us online guidance. As I mentioned, this discovery was during the pandemic. And from there, we started learning lots and lots about how your left and your right brain, they need to communicate together. And when communication is established between your left and your right brain, amongst others, by movement that most human beings start to make very early on in their life. So think, for example, of crawling. You make the left and the right movement with your arms, and you make the left and the right movement with your legs. And that sort of trains your brain, triggers your brain to make neurons. I'm not sure if the word neurons is right. It makes sort of bridges between it establishes bridges between the left and the right brains. And that helps you in your development of lots of different skills. It's a bit of a neurological medical talk. I'm not exactly sure if I'm wording this correctly. But what it comes down to, he didn't crawl. And there were reasons for him not crawling. He was in pain, but because he didn't crawl, and nobody told us to stimulate this or to look out for this, basically our child, or anyone's child who doesn't go through the stages of crawling, those are some basic developmental stages, can later on in life prove to be vital to developing certain things or certain skills, or not developing them, being underdeveloped if they don't do these basic steps, go through these basic steps. And me, I was extremely proud of my son being able to walk before his first birthday. At the time, as I said, a first-time mom, I had no idea about any of this. In hindsight, I would have liked to be informed about this at the time, because it would have saved us a lot of heartbreak. I mean, a lot of heartbreak. It's been intense. So, as I said before, we tried all sorts of therapies with him. Some we thought did work, or worked up to a certain extent. And others did absolutely nothing else but frustrate us all and cost us a lot of money and a lot of precious time. And I realize in saying this that, everyone's journey is personal. What helps one person may not help the next. Knowledge is power here. So I'd like to inspire you, if that's all that you take away from this video, I'd like to at least inspire you to get your knowledge of this subject and to take it from there, and hoping that it helps you in your journey and in you helping to find something for your child that can really help him or her long term. So in our journey, we ended up going to an ergotherapist who was also educated in, she was very skilled in primary reflex integration. And I'd honestly never, ever heard of this before. So I was sort of vigilant, as, we had already tried lots of different things. We'd been back and forth to so many other professionals, and it was wearing a wee boy down. So for who doesn't really know what an ergotherapist does, and I don't say this lightly, as my mum used to be an ergotherapist, and I genuinely didn't know exactly what that meant until I visited an ergotherapist for my child. So an ergotherapy session for children anyway, because that's my experience, it consists of a lot of play, a lot of purposeful activities to basically unlock your child's motor skills. And it's done through a wide variety, a creative blend of exercises and therapies and adaptive tools. And our ergotherapist helped our boy build strength, build coordination, and probably most important of all, build confidence. And the confidence for me, again, that was the biggest thing, because he went from a quiet and self-confident wee boy to a star on the football playing field in under a year's time. And that transformation, it makes me emotional. It was truly miraculous. And he's still a very good football player, and turns out that it's extremely useful in the field to be both left and right-footed. Who knew? I didn't, but now I do. So back to the ergotherapist sessions. So our therapist, by the name of Linda, which is also a funny coincidence because my mum's name is also Linda. She did lots of obstacle courses, like with balls and little pitted sacks, lots of things to trigger lots of his senses. So really therapeutic games that challenge his wee mind and his developing body also. And every session became sort of an opportunity to unlock hidden potentials and, as I said, to give him confidence, but in a playful way. And he really quite enjoyed going there, even if it did take away some time from him playing football or playing with his schoolmates. And Linda, she also gave us exercise to at home. They weren't always fun to do. We had a lot of time to do it during the pandemic, that's for sure. But we were very consistent in doing them daily because, we were really eager to finally get some results. And at the time, not many therapists were available because everything was shutting down due to the pandemic. So I really wanted this to work. And as I mentioned before, our ergotherapist, she specialized in the very intriguing technique called primary reflex integration. And most of the exercise that we did at home were based around this form of therapy. And I'll try to explain the primary reflex integration to you in hoping that I do a good job to, well, at least inspire you to do some research or find maybe literature or even a therapist that is also knowledgeable in this skill, because it truly did wonders for us. So primary reflexes, they are primitive movements that emerge early on in life. So starting as early as development in the womb. And these reflexes play a tremendous, crucial role in an infant's development. And I know that we can't know everything in life, and we probably don't have to, but sometimes I really feel like I missed out on this information, not being aware of some of these basics, because it may have shortened the amount of time and suffering had I known then what I know today. So now, during this therapy, the focus is on integrating these reflexes, and integrating them means for them to change into more mature patterns as a human grows into a bigger person. And that enables smoother motor functions and basically a better growth. So I went online to find some more information to explain this to you in, well, more layman's terms so that it's more understandable. So bear with me, as it was explained to me multiple times, and I had to witness the actual therapy and the changes it brought before I could understand it properly. And I find it hard to put in words, but I'll give it my best shot in the hopes that it will at least inspire you to do your own investigating into this subject. And hopefully it does turn out to be the right fit for your baby or your child, or maybe even for you, because it really also is done a lot for adults. My sister ended up doing this as well. And again, results were really, really good. So for me, at the time, it was really about looking for ways to unlock my child's potential, because I saw it was there. And so did other family members, so did teachers, therapists saw things as well that they said, it's in there somewhere. How do we get it out? And we could really see the frustration in him that things weren't going the way that he wanted them to go. And it made him so insecure because, for him seeing other kids in his class do things that he wanted to do, but it just wouldn't come out right. So eventually we ended up in Linda's practice for ergotherapy and for reflex integration. And she explained to us that reflex integration focuses on harnessing the power of the body's innate reflexes. And that allows them to transition smoothly into more mature patterns of movement. And that's by integrating those reflexes. Then the nervous system, it becomes better equipped to support things like a body's coordination, support finding a good balance of the body, and also eventually a balance of the mind, a better overall focus, so that not each and every trigger distracts a person, or that you may require triggers to become activated in the first place. So it can be underactivation as well as overactivation of basically all of the bodily system, all bodily systems and all your senses, and generally really the overall development of the body as well as the mind. They're really all interconnected, interlinked. I'm not entirely sure about the history of reflex integration therapy. I did read up on it. I do know, and that's what I find important, that its roots are all the way back to developmental psychologists and therapists. So it's really smart people who came up with this therapy. And it draws inspiration from the understanding that reflexes originally vital for survival and development in infancy, and I'll give you some examples of that later. They can sometimes persist or re-emerge in older children and also in adults. So they can re-emerge, and that can cause challenges in motor skills and daily functioning at a later age or a later stage in life. So as I said before, it's not limited to children. Adults facing challenges in motor skills and their coordination, in their daily functioning, they can also benefit from this approach. As I mentioned before, my sister did it as well. And, by targeting specific reflexes and employing targeted exercising, this reflex integration therapy can really bring about significant improvements in one's motor skills, but also in, for her, it was all around posture, also concentration. So really overall quality of life. So maybe you see that it can really be a growing thing on the therapy market nowadays. That this is something that many people do struggle with. And I'll give you some example of what signs and symptoms to be aware of, especially in children's development, that could potentially be an indication of motor challenges and that may benefit a form of intervention like reflex integration therapy. So one of them is, and I mentioned this crawling thing before, delayed or absent crawling, rolling over, delayed rolling over, or sitting up. And our son's crawling was absent. He hardly crawled at all, as I mentioned before, and his rolling over and his sitting up and standing, that was, funnily enough, really early, especially for a premature baby. And he really surprised the doctors there, because hardly did we know at the time that it was an indication of some of the stuff he suffered through later in his life. So the literature on reflex integration may tell you that it's delayed developmental issues like crawling and rolling over, but for some, and in our case, it was the opposite. And it's important to get the whole story here. So I would advise, to get as much possible information about your child's development. Give as much as you can to your practitioner, as you possibly can, because it can be, for us, it was a huge puzzle. And I'll say this again, and I know I'm repeating myself from my other videos as well, but it's so true that it's never ever a one size fits all, and it's never completely generic. Each and every one of us is unique. We all have our own journey, our own signs and symptoms, our own puzzle pieces. And it's just so important to look at that and not the generic story of a subject. But I digress. So let me continue with the list of signs and symptoms. Another one is difficulty with coordinated movements, such as reaching things or grasping objects. And maybe your child finds it hard to keep hold of things. Or maybe your child keeps falling over. It doesn't have a very strong grasp of their toys, maybe. And then that brings me to poor muscle tone or excessive stiffness. And this is for our boy. That was for him the reason that he started rolling over at 2 months. So instead of being delayed in rolling over, he was really early, and we were so proud of him doing that despite his prematurity. But in the end, or now, that we realized that it was more because of stiffness and probably also discomfort that he started to roll over. It wasn't a natural thing to have emerge, and in a certain way. So it's really sad to consider that now, but it was a clear sign at the time. It should have been a clear sign at the time. Also challenges with balance and coordination, or sometimes maintaining an upright posture. And that's quite a tough one because, children learn by falling and getting up again. So persistent primitive reflexes beyond the expected age range. So that's the one, maybe like the crawling. If they crawl for a very long time, for example, and they seem to refuse to walk, that could also be an indication. Or things like, or the sucking on things. If they suck on things for a lot, sucking, and an indication can be, for example, when they suck their thumb, or when they don't want to get rid of their pacifier, their dummies. It doesn't have to be, because there's lots of kids that go through phases like that, but it can be that sucking can be an indication, because the sucking reflex, that's a sucking reflex, I'm not sure what it's called, I'm calling it the sucking reflex. It's a very important one for, and I said I was going to mention this one, it's a very important one for a baby's survival, which is why they will take to your nipple or a bottle after they're born. And that's the only way for them to be fed, basically. So that's why it's important for their survival. And that's one of the primary reflexes that develops, I think, around the 36 weeks mark of pregnancy. And it's also very often the reason that premature born babies are fed via tubes, because they don't have that, they haven't developed that sucking reflex properly. So they can't take to a nipple or a bottle. But the reflex needs to go at one point. It needs to go after a certain amount of months. I'm not sure how many months, but children need to, after they've been able to use that sucking reflex to survive by taking to a nipple or a bottle, children then need to go into a phase of learning to eat solid foods. So that sucking reflex, that's no longer required, basically, and they need to develop skills, and the muscles and things in their mouth to learn to chew their food and to swallow properly. So when our twins, as I mentioned, they were also preemies, they were very small. And we had a lady come into our house after they were discharged from hospital to assist the wee ones in the transition to solid foods. After I can't remember how long it was, a couple of months. When are they allowed solids? 4 or 5 months? I can't remember. But we had a lady come in to help them transition to solid foods, as they found that very, very difficult. And in Dutch, her title is premature speech therapist. And I'm not entirely sure what the English equivalent would be. But she was very skilled. She gave us lots of tips and tricks to make sure that transition was as smooth as it possibly could be for them. So that, again, is an indication, or could have been an indication back then of, or it would have been nice to have a bit more explanation of why that transition can be difficult for children. It has to do with these primary reflexes. And another sign can be the lack of hand-eye coordination, or difficulties with, the really fine motor skills, like with their hands. So, for example, our oldest, he was an extremely messy eater. He would be all over the place at the dinner table, and so would his food. I know that's for more children, but this was ridiculous sometimes. It's super annoying at the time. If only we'd known these things sooner, then we could have acted on them in a different way, because yes, we were very, very impatient with them at times. And also he would, for example, bump into things a lot. And again, we put that down to clumsiness at the time. And obviously, a child could have 1 or 2 of all the signs and symptoms that I've been naming. And it doesn't have to be an indication necessarily, but these things were going on all the time. And after all, they are just children developing. So I can imagine that people miss these signals, but we really noticed the difference in other children in our environment and other children at the daycare. And the carers at the daycare, they noticed things in him as well. And I remember at our daycare, they used to do yearly evaluations, and they did them for each child, and things really did come up there. And at first I sort of dismissed some of these things. You know, I am first-time mom. I'm really proud of the development and the way my baby's doing. So I did dismiss some of the things that they came up with. And I'll give you an example, because during arts and crafts, the carers noticed that our son really struggled, especially with scissors. He couldn't manage them. And I put it down to him being left-handed. And because my dad's left-handed, and we noticed his left hand being a little more dominant than his right. So we sort of assumed he's going to be left-handed. So I bought a special left-handed pair of scissors for children for him to start practicing at home. But he just wasn't very interested in arts and crafts. He still isn't, by the way. So I, at the time, put it down sort of disinterest. But when I was told about it again and again by different teachers, by the time that he went to school, that's when sort of alarm bells were triggered. And that's when we sort of slowly started our journey into trying to figure out what was going on. So, as I said, when he started school, that impact of unresolved motor challenges, that's really when it became more apparent for us. And that's something that I hear a lot, that's when things become a lot more apparent. And that time is apparently very typical for children going through these challenges, as, you know, they're compared to other children. And mums will start to compare them to other children. Teachers start to compare them to other children. So it sort of makes sense. So one thing I would advise is that you really do take note of what other carers and teachers tell you, as timely indication and intervention are really important for your child, because they can really start to suffer when things don't work out for them. And there is help out there. I dismissed a lot of information, and I really do regret that now. So I know that sometimes it can be annoying to have other people judge your kids. But again, if it's the pieces of the puzzle, maybe do take note of what people are saying. Don't automatically do what I did. Don't automatically dismiss. But I digress again. So I'd like to give you some signs and symptoms to watch out for in school-age children. Now, one of the things that was very prominent for us was poor handwriting or difficulties with the fine motor skills, the finer motor tasks, like, for example, cutting or tying shoelaces, writing, using utensils, even for things like drawing. And our boy was very interested in, for example, Lego. He really loved playing with it, but he got very frustrated whilst building. In hindsight, we now understand why, because of the fine motor skills in his hands. But what happened was his dad used to always sit with him to build the Lego. And we sort of put it down to it being him being a bit impatient. And, you know, dad loves quality time with the kids. So he took these moments of building something nice from Lego as, you know, quality time opportunity. Again, we sort of dismissed it. We didn't realize that was yet again an indication of poor motor development. And it wasn't until we saw our younger son play with Lego in a completely different way that we sort of realized that, oh gosh, that was another thing that was going on with our oldest. That was another indication of, you know. Also, a lack of coordination in, for example, sports or physical activities. He hated gymnastic lessons at school. He really hated them. And getting his swimming diploma, that was horrendous for us, for all of us. Because, you know, his upper body would do one stroke and his lower body would do the upper body, what's it, the butterfly stroke, or I'm not sure what you call them in English. And he would be flipping his legs. It was coordinated all wrong. He was doing different strokes up and down. Again, his upper body and his lower body, again, has to do with the brain. They weren't communicating properly. I think I probably blocked a lot of what these drugs are called. It was pure hell. And we live near a lot of water here in the Netherlands. So I was desperate for him to get these diplomas as soon as possible, for safety reasons. But it was the most frustrating thing in the world. He hated those lessons. He hated with a vengeance. And then COVID hit and we had to stop altogether with the swimming lessons. But fortunately, we were able to see our ergotherapist / reflex integration therapist during COVID, during the shutdown, because she did online sessions. And during these sessions, she would demonstrate exercises that we could do at home to try to improve his motor skills. And they really did wonders for him. I remember his teacher being really impressed when he returned to school after so many months. And also he got his swimming diploma reasonably quickly after we started the therapy. It was all within 8 or 9 months of starting the therapy. So that was really impressive. And I remember at the time, we were buying all these different things that we'd find online, all these different sitting cushions, wobbly seats and whatnot, and glasses and special rulers, lots of stuff. And that was all because he had, well, the cushions were, for example, because he had a difficulty sitting still. He was extremely fidgety, excessive fidgeting. That's also a sign of bad motor skills, or poor concentration is another one. And he's still a bit of a dreamer, but I used to be a dreamer. My mum still tells me that to this day. So again, I put that bad concentration, which is a clear sign of bad motor skills, I put it down to genetics, and I ignored that as a sign, even though things were really piling up at this point. And another sign or symptom is challenges with spatial awareness, such as bumping into objects or bumping into other people more often than you would normally find school children doing. And I think I already mentioned this one, but he used to be super clumsy. And I remember, my solution at the time was to go to an optician with him, because I was advised that it could be his eyesight. And the results came back very positive. Nothing was wrong with his eyes. So again, another clear sign. Another sign is discomfort or fatigue during prolonged writing or reading tasks. And his reading really sort of stagnated. And first we thought it may be dyslexia. But a speech therapist, went to a speech therapist, confirmed that it wasn't that. So as you can see, the journey was very extensive, which is why I'm telling you this big, long story in this video. But then fortunately, the physical therapist, we have one in our school, which is really nice because she communicates everything with his teacher. And all of us together, we saw all these signs and symptoms of things that were different compared to other children of his age. And I mentioned this before in this video, that this is the point where we sort of start to find out that he was ambidextrous and his muscles were underdeveloped. And again, you can imagine when you do a task for a prolonged time with poorly developed muscles, like maybe going to the gym or even holding up a cupboard when you're doing DIY in the house or whatever, it starts to ache and it starts to burn. And when that happens to a wee boy trying to write and he sees all his classmates doing a good job, that's really discouraging. And what was really good though, and this could be a very valuable tip for you in the future, is our ergotherapist had all these questionnaires for us to fill out before and also during the therapy sessions. And what she did was she also asked teachers to fill out, I think the forms were slightly different questions on them, more pointed towards child development in school. And they filled them out as well of what they'd seen our boy doing in school. And that really uncovered some pieces of the puzzle too. And Linda even came to sit in the class with both my boys, obviously with my permission and in coordination with the teachers. And again, that really unveiled things about their behaviour in that classroom setting. And Linda was also able to give the teachers advice on how to deal with certain things when it came to their learning styles. And the feedback from both teachers was also very positive as well, you know, because they learn from this too, and they're able to now advise other parents about similar things, maybe even advise them about a similar therapy. So it really sort of filled their toolboxes as well for their way of teaching. And that collaborative approach, you know, to work as a team with healthcare professionals and with therapists, with educators, that sharing of information and all of us following the same recommendations and basically really learning from each other, that was, for me as a parent, that was truly wonderful to see us all work together for our boy. And, you know, I remember feeling so alone and misunderstood sometimes when, you know, especially you do sort of compare your children to other children of the same age. And it became really hurtful for me as a parent, but also for our wee boy, because he was really picking up the signs as well. But then when a team pulls together, that really motivates you to keep strong, you know, for the sake of your child. And that was wonderful. So I wish that upon everyone, that whatever the issues may be, that you can find such a strong team. For so many reasons, it's so good. Now, another sign that I've just thought of is difficulty following multi-step instructions or trying to organize belongings, for example. And this was also a huge thing for him. He still isn't a terribly good organizer at this time. But I do compare it to the twins, and that's not always fair, I suppose. But I do see a huge difference in the way that the twins developed compared to my oldest. And that's because, I think I mentioned that before, they were even more prematurely born than he was. And they had lots of medical issues. So they were really closely supervised and monitored by lots of different medical professionals right from the start of their life, basically. And that made, that did make a difference. Also, you know, him being the oldest, that's also a thing, I suppose. You know, us as parents, we had to discover everything as well, and he needed to discover everything for the first time. So I guess being the oldest can also sometimes be a bit of a downside to that. But that's what it was like for us anyway. Because of that, the extra help that I got with the twins, it was just a lot easier for me to act on anything I saw with the twins. And I got balls rolling a lot quicker for them, because the lines were really shorter. I had so many people around me. And I have a boy-girl twin, and especially our boy had a lot of the same signs and symptoms as our oldest, but we acted upon them a lot quicker because we knew more things. And he is actually doing really well in school today, which is a huge relief. But what I will do is I'll edit in a picture of him, my boy twin, when he started the primary reflex integration therapy. I didn't document it as well as with I documented that better as with our oldest son. But Linda made him draw a certain picture, and she would give him an example and ask him to draw it for him to copy what she'd drawn. And again, the picture will be somewhere up here. And again, it still fills me with sort of a shocked feeling when I see this, because his brain basically could not translate that picture into what was actually on paper. So the squarish drawing, that's him right at the start of the therapy, attempting to draw a star shape with lines. And the second drawing, that's a proper star shape, that's him a little under a year into the reflex integration therapy. So his left and right brain were not communicating at the start of the therapy. So that's the more squarish picture that he drew. And after almost a year, he was able to draw the picture. His brain was able to make the correct translation, to make the connection. Thanks to all the exercises that we did during that year. It's amazing. And again, I'm still shocked. I'm super grateful that I found this form of therapy. it was a long, long road and a very hard and at times extremely emotional journey. And I know that we're not completely there yet with our kids, but we've been able to uncover a lot of our children's potential. And, had we not done this or not found this therapy, I think there would have been probably a lot more misunderstanding and insecurities from both us as parents as from our kids. And that over time can have such a detrimental effect on everyone's mental well-being. Seeing your child suffer and become really insecure, that's hellish. It's pure hell. And not knowing how to help them, that's extremely frustrating. And that, I know it sounds heavy, but it really eats away at your soul. That's how I experience this. So my tips for parents out there who struggle, especially with the behavior of their kids, please don't dismiss it as a difficult child. There's so often a reason behind why they're acting up. So, observing your children, not dismissing advice, not dismissing signs and symptoms or advice from other carers because you think you know your child best. And also try and document what you're seeing and pay close attention to your child's development, their motor skills and any unusual behaviors. Sometimes you do have to compare your kids to other kids to properly see things. And when in doubt, discuss your concerns with healthcare professionals or educators. Go online, educate yourself about motor development and all the emotional consequences and the impact of especially underdevelopment that it can have. It took us such a long time to finally hit the mark with this therapy. And even then it was quite a heavy journey and we couldn't fix things overnight. I don't think that can be done. Fixing things overnight. I wish it was that simple. And another tip also, to be on the lookout for your own mental health during everything. I know firsthand how this can affect you over time. It can be really heavy on you, and that can reflect onto your loved ones. So, take care of yourself too. And another thing that I don't think we did enough is to really celebrate every milestone. No matter how small, embrace the joy of witnessing your child growing and thriving and learning. Our son started football after the therapy sessions ended because the sessions coincided with the time that we used to go and see the therapist. And because he's 2-footed, that hasn't completely gone, but he's a really good player. So, we got rid of a lot of the left and the right stuff, and lots of stuff was integrated. A lot happened during the therapy, all wonderful things, but it's not completely gone. And luckily for him, because he's, I'm really proud of my son in any case, and I'm proud of all my kids in any case, but he is an extremely good football player. And I think he's the star player of his team. And I think some of his teammates think that too. And he used to be extremely insecure about everything, and seeing him thrive on the football field, that does wonders to the whole family. In the year after we finished the therapy for him, that was also the year when he started playing football. That was an extremely good year for him, also grade-wise in school, confidence-wise, sports-wise. He was growing in all different areas of life. And I can't tell you, for us as parents, how wonderful that was to see that happen. And obviously, the best of all of it is that it was happening for him. So online, you will find lots of exercises and literature on this subject. But I do want to say that while the exercises provided, they sort of offer a glimpse into the world of reflex integration. But I would genuinely advise to seek the guidance of a qualified professional, to ensure that there's a comprehensive and also a very personalized therapeutic intervention for you or for your child, because again, it's not one size fits all. And I read a lot about the therapy before I found a good therapist, but I honestly could not have done all these exercises that they show you online, or that they speak about in books. I could not have done that by myself. You really need proper guidance. It's like going to the gym and not exactly knowing how something works, and you go and you tear a muscle or something like that. No, you get my drift. Yeah, I probably would have gotten these exercises wrong and became frustrated through it not working. And then that's another therapy road that I didn't want to walk down anymore, and another frustration for our child. So professional guidance, super important. So again, a big, long story. I hope this helps you on your journey. I wish you the very best of luck. If you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer them. Just leave a comment below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Take care.